Hollywood sold cigarettes as the ultimate symbol of cool, power, rebellion. But what they never showed was the bill that came later. Some of the biggest legends in history smoked 4, 5, even 7 packs a day, as if their lungs were working overtime for the studio. From screen icons to cultural giants, these are the stars who made smoking look glamorous and paid a devastating price when the cameras stopped rolling. Number 1. Richard Burton. Richard Burton wasn't just an actor. He was a force of nature, wrapped in a tuxedo, armed with a thunderous voice and enough charisma to command an entire room without taking a single step. On screen, every word he spoke felt carved into stone. Off-screen, however, Burton lived with the same intensity, and nowhere was that more obvious than in his relationship with cigarettes. This wasn't the occasional smoke after dinner or a celebratory cigar after a successful film. For Burton, smoking was practically a full-time occupation with no weekends and absolutely no retirement plan. By his own admission, he smoked between 60 and 100 cigarettes every single day. Let that sink in for a moment. Most people see a pack and think that should last me a while. Burton apparently saw one and thought, nice appetizer. His younger brother later claimed the number was closer to 100 cigarettes daily, which makes his ashtray less of a household item and more of a workplace necessity. Hollywood loved the image. The deep voice, the brooding stare, the clouds of smoke drifting around one of the greatest actors of his generation. It looked sophisticated on camera, but real life doesn't hand out Academy Awards for surviving bad habits. Behind the glamour was a man chained to an addiction that never stopped demanding more. Burton had fame, wealth, talent, and a presence that few performers ever matched. Yet cigarettes remained one of the strongest forces in his life. His story stands as a brutal reminder that Hollywood could make almost anything look elegant, even something quietly destroying the very people who sold the illusion. When the cameras stopped rolling, the smoke stayed behind, and so did the consequences. Number 2. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart didn't just smoke in movies, he practically turned cigarettes into a Hollywood fashion statement. With that gravelly voice, tired eyes, and the kind of face that looked like it had already heard every bad excuse in America, Bogart made a simple cigarette seem like the coolest accessory a man could own. The problem, real life doesn't care how iconic you look. Eventually, everybody has to pay the tab, and Bogart's bill came with interest. Off-screen, his relationship with tobacco was anything but casual. Bogart reportedly smoked 2 packs a day while drinking heavily enough to make bartenders feel financially secure about their future. Friends noticed the constant coughing, the exhaustion, and even memory problems linked to years of alcohol abuse, but the image remained untouchable. Ironically, cigarettes became part of his acting style almost by accident. During one long, boring scene early in his career, a director suggested he smoke to give his hands something to do. One cigarette later, Hollywood had found a brand new symbol of cool. Before long, audiences couldn't imagine Bogart without a cloud of smoke floating somewhere nearby, and cigarettes themselves were sometimes nicknamed bogies. Not bad for a prop, absolutely terrible for a pair of lungs. Unfortunately, the same habit that built his legend slowly destroyed the man behind it. Bogart ignored warning signs for years, refusing to see a doctor, until 1956, when persistent coughing and health problems could no longer be brushed aside. By then, doctors discovered esophageal cancer tied to decades of heavy smoking. The tough guy who always seemed one step ahead of trouble finally met an enemy he couldn't outsmart. Hollywood sold cigarettes as sophistication, mystery, and confidence. But Humphrey Bogart left behind a much darker truth. Sometimes the coolest image on screen hides the most dangerous reality off it. Number 3. John Wayne. John Wayne didn't walk into Hollywood. He rode in like the American frontier itself had decided to become a movie star. Standing 6'4", with a commanding presence that could fill an entire screen, Wayne built a career that spanned more than 170 films, including an astonishing 142 westerns. To millions of fans, he was the definition of toughness. Cowboys, soldiers, lawmen, he played men who stared danger in the face and never blinked. But behind that larger-than-life image was a lifestyle that even the Duke himself couldn't conquer. Wayne had been a chain smoker since his teenage years, treating cigarettes like they were part of his wardrobe. And not just a pack or two. Reports claim he eventually smoked an unbelievable 7 packs of unfiltered Camel cigarettes every single day. 7 packs. At that point, the ashtray wasn't furniture anymore. It was practically a supporting actor with its own union card. Smoking wasn't his only vice either. Heavy drinking became another constant companion, and during his later years, some directors reportedly rushed filming schedules to finish before lunchtime, hoping to avoid the effects of alcohol on his behavior. That's a very different image from the fearless cowboy riding into the sunset. Eventually, real life proved tougher than any movie villain. In 1964, Wayne underwent surgery to remove most of his left lung after decades of smoking had taken their toll. 15 years later, complications related to stomach cancer claimed his life at the age of 72. John Wayne remains one of Hollywood's greatest legends, but his story carries a hard truth. Even the toughest man in the Wild West couldn't win a showdown against the damage caused by a lifetime of smoke. Sometimes the enemy isn't waiting across the street, it's already in your hand. Number 4. Jackie Gleason. Jackie Gleason didn't just enter Hollywood, he stormed into it like a one-man parade with a steak dinner waiting at the finish line. As the unforgettable Ralph Cramden in The Honeymooners, he became one of America's most beloved entertainers, filling every room with booming laughter, massive energy, and a personality too big to fit inside a television screen. Fans adored him because everything about Gleason felt larger than life. The problem was real life eventually started keeping score. Behind the cameras, his appetite matched his legendary reputation. His weight reportedly swung between 230 and 330 pounds, and eating was never a small event. Gleason could sit through multiple meals in one sitting and still find room for an entire gallon of ice cream afterward. But food was only the opening act. Whiskey flowed through his daily routine like it had its own dressing room, and those close to him claimed he was rarely far from his next drink. Then came the cigarettes. Gleason reportedly smoked 5 packs a day, which is less of a smoking habit and more like personally keeping the tobacco industry in business. For years, his body absorbed the punishment, but eventually the bill arrived. The overeating, drinking, and endless clouds of smoke took a devastating toll, and colon cancer ultimately claimed his life at 71. Jackie Gleason left behind an incredible legacy of laughter, but also a sobering reminder that even the biggest personalities cannot outrun the consequences of living too large for too long. Number 5. Rod Serling. Rod Serling looked like the kind of man who had life completely figured out. He created The Twilight Zone, one of the most influential television shows ever made, turning ordinary fears into unforgettable stories that kept millions awake at night. Hollywood celebrated him as a creative genius, but success did not bring him peace. After the show ended, Serling became haunted by a terrifying question: how do you follow a masterpiece? Every new project felt less like a fresh opportunity and more like trying to wrestle lightning twice. The applause never silenced the doubt growing inside him. To escape that pressure, Serling leaned harder into alcohol and cigarettes. And this was not the occasional smoke after dinner. He reportedly burned through 4 packs a day, which is less of a bad habit, and more like giving your lungs a full-time office job with no vacation days. The drinking only made things worse. While the public still saw the brilliant storyteller who had changed television forever privately, he was fighting battles that no audience could see. The cigarettes and whiskey became his version of therapy, except the therapist was quietly sending him the bill with interest. Years of abuse eventually caught up with him. His arteries became dangerously clogged, forcing him to undergo bypass surgery in 1975. Tragically, his weakened heart could not survive the operation, and Rod Serling passed away at just 50 years old. The man who spent his career warning America about strange worlds and unexpected endings left behind one final lesson of his own. Sometimes the darkest twilight zone is not somewhere out there. Sometimes it is the one we create for ourselves, one cigarette at a time. Number 6, Bette Davis. Bette Davis could win an Oscar, terrify a director, and steal an entire movie with nothing more than a single look. She was fierce, brilliant, and completely unforgettable. But there was one companion that stayed by her side longer than any co-star, any studio contract, or any Hollywood friendship: a cigarette. And honestly, those cigarettes probably knew more secrets about old Hollywood than half the gossip columnists in town. Known as the Queen of the Warner Lot, Davis became one of the most respected actresses of her generation. She was the first performer to earn 5 consecutive Oscar nominations for acting and won 2 Academy Awards. But behind that legendary image was a smoking habit so intense it became part of her identity. Davis reportedly smoked 4 packs of Vanguard cigarettes a day and claimed she could not go more than 10 minutes without lighting another one. At that point, it was not a habit anymore. It was a scheduling system. Even the dentist's office could not stop her. She smoked in waiting rooms, interviews, and reportedly even in the dental chair, which sounds less like confidence and more like tobacco winning a hostage negotiation. Henry Fonda once joked that after knowing her for decades, he had the cigarette burns to prove it. Bette Davis lived to 81 and passed away from breast cancer, not a smoking-related disease, but her story still remains one of Hollywood's strangest contradictions. A woman powerful enough to dominate the screen, yet never fully able to put down the smoke. If you're enjoying this dark trip through old Hollywood, hit subscribe now, because the next story gets even wilder. And trust me, you don't want to miss what these stars were doing when the cameras stopped rolling. Number 7, Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy spent decades playing the steady, dependable man on screen, the kind of guy who looked like he could solve a crisis with a calm voice and a single raised eyebrow. Audiences loved him because he felt real, grounded, and impossible to shake. But behind that legendary image was a different story entirely. Tracy wasn't just carrying a few bad habits around, he had practically given them permanent residency. Alcohol, cigarettes, pills, and weight problems followed him through much of his adult life, and eventually, they all started demanding payment at the same time. By the early 1960s, his body was waving more red flags than a referee at a boxing match. In 1963, Tracy suffered a severe attack of breathlessness that sent him rushing to the hospital, turning years of friendly medical advice into a terrifying reality check. Then came another devastating blow in 1965, when doctors diagnosed him with hypertensive heart disease. Suddenly, all those late-night cigarettes and years of excess didn't seem like harmless habits anymore. They looked more like unwanted business partners collecting decades of unpaid debts. Hollywood may have loved happy endings, but real life wasn't following the script. As his health continued to decline, Tracy became increasingly confined to his home, a heartbreaking fate for a man who had once commanded movie screens across America. Yet amid the struggle, one bright light remained: his lifelong bond with Katharine Hepburn. Her love and devotion stayed with him through his darkest days, proving that even when the body begins to fail, the human spirit can still find comfort in the people who matter most. Spencer Tracy's story is both tragic and beautiful. A reminder that while bad habits can take a heavy toll, love sometimes becomes the final performance worth remembering. Number 8. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. belonged to the Rat Pack, that legendary brotherhood where everybody looked impossibly cool. Every joke landed perfectly, and every night felt like it could turn into tomorrow's biggest headline. The image was pure Hollywood magic: tailored suits, smooth voices, endless swagger, and enough charisma to light up Las Vegas without paying the electric bill. But while some of the hard partying stories were exaggerated over the years, there was one habit Sammy absolutely wasn't pretending about: his love affair with cigarettes. And Sammy didn't just smoke behind the scenes. He turned it into part of the show. In one of his signature moves, he would take a puff during a performance and exhale the smoke while singing the next line. It looked effortless, stylish, and unbelievably cool. Unfortunately, it was also about as healthy as using your guitar as firewood during a concert. Nat King Cole himself warned Sammy that the heat from cigarette smoke could seriously damage his vocal cords. But like many stars of that era, Sammy believed the magic would last forever. The audience cheered, the spotlight stayed bright, and the cigarettes kept burning. By the 1980s, reality finally caught up. Persistent vocal problems led him to a specialist who discovered inflamed nodules on his vocal cords, the exact danger Nat King Cole had predicted years earlier. The very habit that made him look sophisticated on stage was slowly destroying the instrument that made him a legend in the first place. Sammy Davis Jr.'s story is a painful reminder that Hollywood could make almost anything seem glamorous. But cigarettes always collect their payment eventually. No standing ovation, no bright lights, and no smooth performance can bargain with the damage left behind when the smoke finally clears. Number 9. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn didn't just become a movie star, he became a walking legend. By the late 1930s, films like The Adventures of Robin Hood turned him into Hollywood's ultimate adventurer. On screen, he was fearless, charming, and impossible to resist. Off-screen, he lived as if rules were merely friendly suggestions. Flynn's lifestyle was every bit as wild as his reputation. He drank heavily, reportedly sneaking vodka onto movie sets by injecting it into oranges when alcohol was forbidden. He even shared a home with David Niven that they jokingly called Cirrhosis by the Sea, which sounds less like a mansion and more like a medical diagnosis with ocean views. And when parties became boring, Flynn and John Huston entertained themselves with bare-knuckle boxing, because apparently small talk was never exciting enough. But the constant smoking, drinking, drug use, and endless scandals slowly took their toll. Flynn struggled with opium addiction, and his reputation suffered after serious legal accusations in 1942. Although he was acquitted, public opinion never fully recovered, and the golden boy who once ruled Hollywood began losing both his health and his career. In 1959, while trying to sell his beloved yacht, Zaka Flynn suffered a fatal heart attack at just 50 years old. The autopsy shocked everyone. His body reportedly resembled that of a 75-year-old man with a liver devastated by years of excess. Errol Flynn lived life at full speed, but his story remains a brutal reminder that even the greatest adventures eventually run out of road. Number 10. Yul Brynner. Yul Brynner looked indestructible. With his shaved head, commanding voice, and unforgettable performances in The King and I and the Magnificent Seven, he carried himself like a man who could intimidate an entire room without raising his voice. Hollywood saw strength, confidence, and pure star power. But behind that larger-than-life image was a habit quietly doing exactly what villains in movies never could, bringing down the hero from the inside. Brenner wasn't an occasional smoker. He reportedly burned through 5 packs of cigarettes every single day, which is less of a hobby and more like personally keeping an entire tobacco company in business. For years, the addiction followed him everywhere through Broadway triumphs, Hollywood fame, and worldwide admiration. The audience saw a fearless icon. Meanwhile, his lungs were probably sending emergency notices that nobody wanted to read. Like many stars of his generation, Brenner believed he could outrun the consequences. Unfortunately, cigarettes have never cared how famous their customers are. Eventually, lung cancer caught up with him, forcing one of Hollywood's toughest men to face an enemy he could not defeat. But unlike many others, Brenner chose to leave behind something more powerful than another movie role. Before his passing, he recorded a public service message for the American Cancer Society, asking that it be shown only after he was gone. Looking straight into the camera, with a voice weakened by illness, he delivered a warning that still sends chills decades later. Whatever you do, just don't smoke. No dramatic music, no special effects, just the heartbreaking honesty of a man who learned the truth too late. And perhaps that's why Yul Brynner remains one of Hollywood's most powerful reminders that even legends are not immune to the price of bad habits. If Yul Brynner's final warning hit you hard, comment "Don't smoke" below, because sometimes the most powerful message comes from a legend who learned the truth too late. Number 11. Clark Gable. Clark Gable wasn't just a movie star, he was Hollywood royalty. They called him the King of Hollywood, and honestly, with that legendary mustache, that unmistakable charm, and his unforgettable performance as Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, nobody was arguing. He won an Academy Award, captured millions of hearts, and even left the silver screen at the height of his fame to serve his country during World War II. But behind the medals, the glamour, and the larger-than-life image was a habit that never stopped following him: cigarettes. Gable didn't smoke casually. He reportedly went through 3 packs of unfiltered cigarettes every single day for more than 3 decades. And apparently, regular cigarettes weren't enough excitement, because he also enjoyed cigars and pipe tobacco, turning his lungs into what must have felt like Hollywood's longest-running smoke machine. At that point, the ashtray wasn't just an accessory, it was practically part of his management team. Like many stars of his era, Gable lived as if toughness and fame somehow made him immune to consequences. Unfortunately, nicotine has never been impressed by box office numbers. Years of heavy smoking and indulgence eventually caught up with him. On November 16, 1960, Clark Gable suffered his 4th heart attack and passed away in Los Angeles at the age of 59. The man who once seemed larger than life discovered the same harsh truth that so many Hollywood legends learned too late: even kings don't get special treatment from their own bad habits. Gable left behind an incredible legacy of films, courage, and charisma, but his story remains a powerful reminder that no crown is strong enough to protect a person from the damage they willingly carry every single day. Number 12. Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn looked like elegance itself had decided to become a human being. From Breakfast at Tiffany's to Roman Holiday, she captivated the world with grace, kindness, and a timeless beauty that made her seem almost untouchable. She wasn't Hollywood's wild child or scandal queen. She was sophistication in a little black dress. But behind that flawless image was a habit that proved danger doesn't always arrive wearing a villain's costume. Sometimes it arrives with pearls, a beautiful smile, and a cigarette holder that fooled an entire generation. Unlike many of her louder, harder-living contemporaries, Hepburn carried herself with quiet dignity. Yet reports suggest she smoked 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes a day for much of her adult life. That's a lot of smoke for someone remembered as light as air. At that point, her cigarette holder probably deserved its own agent and a Lifetime Achievement Award. On-screen smoking looked elegant and mysterious, becoming part of the glamorous image Hollywood sold to millions. Off-screen, however, the reality was far less romantic. The same habit that followed rough-and-tumble movie stars had quietly found its way into the life of one of cinema's most beloved icons. What makes Audrey Hepburn's story so powerful is the contrast. She survived the hardships of World War II, built one of the greatest careers in film history, and later devoted herself to humanitarian work that inspired the world. Yet even someone so admired and compassionate wasn't immune to dangerous habits. Audrey left behind a legacy of beauty, kindness, and unforgettable performances, but her life also reminds us that poison doesn't always look ugly. Sometimes it looks absolutely beautiful until the bill finally comes due. Number 13, Paul Newman. Paul Newman looked like the kind of man who had won the genetic lottery and decided to stay humble about it. With those famous blue eyes, an endless list of classic films, and a reputation as one of Hollywood's genuine good guys, he seemed almost untouchable. He had the talent, the charm, and enough charisma to make an entire room forget what it was talking about. But like so many stars of his generation, Newman grew up in an era when cigarettes were treated less like a health risk and more like an unofficial membership card to Hollywood. For years, smoking was simply part of the culture around him. Back then, movie sets were filled with smoke advertisements, made tobacco look sophisticated, and nobody imagined the bill would arrive with such devastating interest. It's almost unbelievable now, but there was a time when lighting a cigarette was considered healthier than admitting you were stressed. Hollywood logic has always been a special kind of logic. While Newman eventually focused on racing philanthropy and building one of the most respected legacies in entertainment, the damage from decades of smoking never completely disappeared. In 2008, Paul Newman passed away after battling lung cancer at the age of 83. The world lost not just a movie star, but a man admired for his kindness, humility, and generosity. His story carries the same hard lesson found throughout old Hollywood fame: good looks and legendary status don't come with immunity. Even the man many called the perfect gentleman couldn't outrun the consequences of a habit that an entire generation was taught to believe was harmless. Number 14, Betty Grable. Betty Grable wasn't just a Hollywood star, she was a national obsession. During World War II, her famous pin-up photo decorated the lockers and barracks of millions of American soldiers, turning her into one of the biggest symbols of beauty and glamour the country had ever seen. With her dazzling smile and girl-next-door charm, Betty looked like the last person anyone would associate with danger. But old Hollywood had a way of making even the most destructive habits look fashionable, and cigarettes were no exception. Like many stars of her era, Grable grew up in an industry where smoking was practically part of the job description. Studios promoted it, magazines glamorized it, and movie audiences accepted it as a sign of sophistication. Betty reportedly became a longtime smoker, carrying the same habit that followed countless actors and actresses through Hollywood's golden age. Back then, a cigarette wasn't seen as a warning label. It was treated like another beauty accessory. Apparently, the only thing more essential than a good script was a lighter that actually worked. For decades, Betty remained one of America's most beloved entertainers, but the damage caused by years of smoking eventually caught up with her. In 1973, she passed away from lung cancer at the age of 56, leaving behind a legacy far bigger than the glamorous images that made her famous. Her story is another painful reminder that Hollywood sold cigarettes as elegance and charm, but real life always told a different story. The camera could make the smoke look beautiful, yet behind every cloud was a price that even the brightest stars could never avoid.